Welcome to another edition of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Ontario's plans to revive manufacturing and other forms of economic development are key to Canada's future economic growth. Once again, we're fortunate to have as a guest Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, the Honourable Vic Fedeli. Welcome back to the program, Vic.
It's great to be here today, Tony. It's been nice to see you at so many events in the last couple of months as well.
Well, we're getting out and about a little bit more now that the society's opening up and the economy's opening up, and that's obviously great to have you on the program as well for that reason. So, first of all, could you maybe describe for our viewers what you see as the state of the Ontario economy right now?
Well, I think we're in a very, very solid shape. I know we hear a lot of media talk, which tends to be a bit gloomier, but I can tell you, Tony, just in the last 3 weeks, so we just got back from the Farnborough Air Show,
Right.
And a side trip to Brussels, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But there, they look at Ontario, well, they look at Canada, but specifically Ontario, as really a sea of calm in this world of turmoil. And they see stability in Ontario, and there was a lot of excitement, a lot of interest in Ontario at Farnborough. Now, just days before we went, we made $1.5 billion announcement from Umicore. They're in Belgium, and they will be manufacturing the precursor and cathodes for our electric vehicle batteries. And that is a solid $1.5 billion investment in the township of Loyalist. Days before that, we saw Tata Consultancy Services from India make an announcement. I was at their announcement and spoke. They are hiring 5,000 people in an expanded consultancy services in downtown Toronto. That's over the course of 5 years. And only the week before that was TELUS announcing $23 billion investment into the province of Ontario in the next 4 years, with a 9,500 person increase. So I tell you those in the context that they made those announcements fully understanding the current interest rate scenario, the current inflation numbers. They made these announcements, all three of those, the 23 billion, the $1.5 billion, and the 5,000 employees at Tata from India. They made those in the current market. So
Right.
I would say our fundamentals, Tony, are strong, and that's why they're here.
Yeah, and I want to delve into some of those examples you said. We'll do that as the program proceeds. So hold those thoughts. I would just, before our first break, love to get from you your priorities. You've been reaffirmed as the Minister of Economic Development in the second term of the Ford government. So tell us a little bit about your priorities.
Well, it will be exactly as the name of the ministry states, economic development, job creation, and trade, with a mandate for small business is been added to my portfolio. So it really will be continuing to get the message out of how we've lowered the cost of doing business in Ontario by $7 billion a year, and searching out those economic development opportunities in advanced manufacturing, in electric vehicles, which is a prime push for us, in life sciences, aerospace, tech. Those are the real core areas of growth here in Ontario, as well as many others, of course, in ag and health and all of the others. But the trade file, I had not been able to travel as trade minister for more than 2 years. So it was very good to get to the UK and a day trip by train over to Brussels to meet with Umicore, the $1.5 billion investors, and first thank them. But secondly, the team we've been working with by Zoom to meet them face to face and to talk now about very specific Ontario prospects and how Ontario can fill that supply chain. And so that kind of is the segue into what I'm doing, is really looking at the holes in the supply chain, the gaps, and Ontario can fill them.
We're going to talk about supply chains next. We're going to take a brief break. We're here with our guest, the Honourable Vic Fedeli, Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. Lots to talk about. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these small announcements. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with the Honourable Vic Fedeli. He's Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. Vic, just before the break, you started to talk about the supply chain. There's been a lot of talk about supply chains. You know my involvement in rethinking supply chains as well. What's your sense of some of the issues involving supply chain? How do you see it as a challenge for Ontario that can be fixed, that can be in a better position in the future?
Well, that's a great point and a great approach that you take, Tony. I would say let's go back to when COVID first hit the world, and we found out here in Ontario, who knew? We didn't make anything that was necessary in terms of PPE, right? We stopped making it all, and Premier Ford at the time said, look, never again will we be caught short. So we put first 50 million and then a second 50 million into the pot to begin to make products here in Ontario specifically for PPE with the first 50 million. And the second 50 million was more for med tech, life sciences, but on the tech side. And lo and behold, 2 years later, we went from almost zero production in Ontario to the point where the province of Ontario now buys 74% of all our PPE is now made domestically, and for the most part here in Ontario. And we did an announcement just before the election of a more than $100 million nitrile glove company will be building a facility in London, Ontario. And when that occurs, it'll be 92% of all PPE will be made here.
Fantastic. So the big change there. Let's talk about electric vehicle production then, because that's, again, partially a supply chain issue and partially, we want to be, as Ontarians, part of a very important future and present economic industry. So it's been a priority for you. Just go through a little bit how Ontario is capitalizing on this kind of industrial development.
Look, I'll be a little political for 1 second. We went from almost a dead stop here in Ontario in terms of manufacturing to now we are considered the pointy edge of the spear when it comes to electric vehicles. We have the critical minerals. Now with Umicore, we have the precursor and cathode. We have with the Koreans, the electric vehicle battery manufacturing, and with Ontario's 5 original equipment manufacturers or OEMs, they're now announced their production of EVs and or hybrids in the case of Toyota and Honda, with much more news to come. Tony, $16 billion in announcements in 20 months.
Wow.
I mean, that's unheard of in Canadian history. It's certainly record-breaking for Ontario. Brought us from dead last to the right on the front end of these investments.
And how did you give us a sense of how you were able to convince them that Ontario was the place to be?
It started with, again, I'll be a little bit political, when Premier Wynne was sitting on a stage in Windsor with then Fiat Chrysler chairman Sergio Marchionne, and she mused, are you going to consider expanding Fiat Chrysler here in Windsor? And he looked at her and said, are you kidding? You've created one of the most expensive jurisdictions in North America. We can't imagine even staying here if you don't reduce the cost of doing business. Then we got elected and Premier Ford said, listen up, guys, that's priority number 1. And we have immediately cut the cost of WSIB, workplace safety, by 50%. That's a $2.5 billion savings to businesses every single year without touching the benefits. And then other things, lowering the taxes, putting in lower energy rates for industrial and commercial, lowering the provincial share of local property taxes for industry, all of those things together, cutting red tape, $7 billion a year in reductions. Premier Ford and I went back to all of the companies down at Toyota in Plano, Texas, and Ford. We visited all of their plants and we said to them, you asked us what to do. We've done it. Now it's your turn.
Right.
And we all stepped up.
That's a great story because it was very clear, and it was just before the June 2nd election, but you've been following through post-election that you've got a strategy on electric vehicles, and Ontario is now part of the picture, which is just amazing. We're going to take another brief break. We're going to continue our conversation with Vic Fedeli, Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with the Honourable Vic Fedeli. He is Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. And I should say, the Member of Provincial Parliament for Nipissing. I haven't said that yet. We always like to know where our folks are from. So, and I know you know that community very well, Vic. You just came back from, so people don't maybe realize this, Farnborough is a large airplane and aerospace sort of trade show just outside of London, UK. I was there a couple of times as Canada's industry minister. So let's talk about some other industries. Obviously, aerospace is something that you think Ontario can be a leader on. Talk a little bit about Farnborough, the air show, and promoting Ontario's aerospace industry.
Well, we've got 39,000 employees who work in the aerospace sector. There are only 5 countries in the entire planet who actually manufacture a commercial airplane, and Canada is one of them. And so that's very exciting. It means we are one of the world leaders in Ontario. We make Bombardier's Global 7500, the Global Express. We have a couple hundred aerospace companies who make parts. We are one of the world's leaders in landing gear, manufacturing and design and engineering. We have 40 different aerospace programs that are held throughout our 20 university and colleges that specialize in that. So we put out about 50,000 STEM grads every year. So we have all that's needed for a company to build an aircraft from end to end and or any part that's required.
And do you see that expanding in the future? Are there some good trade opportunities for us there?
I do, but I think this one will take a little longer. Certainly aerospace, aviation, if you will, that was severely hit during the pandemic. And I think there's still a long way to go to recover. And so a lot of projects were on hold. I still see them on hold, but they know that Ontario is continuing to work at lowering the costs, and when they're ready, we'll be even better suited for them.
So when you were in London, Farnborough, and then Brussels, Belgium, what did you say? What's the value proposition you're trying to impart to potential businesses, potential investors about investing in Ontario?
We picked up on their comment about it being a real sea of tranquility. So we talked about you need to be in Ontario because it's stable. We have the trained professionals, a steady stream that will come and work for you. We have, we talk about the value of our dollar, of course. We talk about our healthcare system. A lot of people around the world do not realize that if you fell down and broke your ankle, you can walk into any hospital, show your OHIP card, and walk out without having to make a payment.
Right.
And we explain to them how that's advantageous to them. And so we talk about the ecosystem. In the case of Farnborough, we talked about the ecosystem that we've created end to end for aerospace, so that no matter what you do, you're in a grouping of companies that is familiar, and that you will not be a stranger in a strange business in a strange land.
Now, just today, there was an interesting announcement by your colleague, the Honourable Monty McNaughton, who's been on our program, about Ontario wanting to take a little bit more control over immigration just to get the right mix of people for the right jobs that are needed. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree entirely. I can tell you, I'll put it in as the words that I think best describe it. We want the same deal as Quebec. That's what I would say to you. In Ontario and the rest of the provinces, other than Quebec, you have an allotment of immigrants that you're allowed from the federal government, but they're all put in silos. Immigration of employment, or this one is a student. All of the different categories, investment. Quebec, here's your allotment, do what you want with them. And it's a hell of a better deal than the rest of us get. We're limited to 9,700 out of the hundreds of thousands we get. 9,700 are limited in the category in terms of employment and investment that we need. That should be 90,000, not 9,000.
Vic Fedeli is our guest today. He's Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. Having a great conversation here. We've got one more segment for you. Please stay with us. We'll be back after these messages. Back soon. Thank you. And welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. We're continuing our conversation with the Honourable Vic Fedeli. He's Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. Vic talked a lot about, selling Ontario to potential investors. Now, I know this is not your lane. I know this is a federal issue. I get that. But it does have impact on your ability to do your job and probably some of the feedback you're getting from local businesses at the very least. But we've had some challenging issues as a country, whether it's obviously it's a post-COVID world, things are ramping up, and Pearson Airport seems to be the worst on the planet in terms of getting people to where they want to get to with their bags on time. We've seen the passport office chaos. We've seen the Rogers outage. A lot of these issues. Now, I know it's all federal. I'm not asking you to take ownership of that, but can you give us a sense of what your thoughts are on this and how this might be complicating your job, or maybe it's not a valid factor? Would love to get your thoughts on this kind of issue.
Well, Tony, they are valid questions to ask, and I thank you for them. I can tell you, I just got back, as we've talked about a few times, from international travel, and it is chaotic. And I think it's quite a concern to our business community. I've flown 106 times this year already, and I can tell you that's when the flights actually do get off the ground. The delays, they simply have to be improved, and we have to continue to put pressure on the federal government to work with the airports and the airlines and all of the groups that are affected. I keep saying the federal government gave Air Canada $6 billion. So I look at my own community in North Bay. We went from 4 flights a day, and we're lucky if we have 4 flights a week now. And that's an absolute fact. I'm not exaggerating that. There's only 1 flight a day booked, but it hasn't gone every day. There wouldn't be 3 consecutive days that the flight makes it out. So, we really have to hold these airlines accountable, give them all the help they need in terms of finding their people, if that indeed is what the issue is. But I would say the federal government needs to tighten the guidelines for these airlines that are holding back our progress. Yes, people are indeed flying, but it is not a very good experience, and it's we just hate to see people revert back to doing their meetings by Zoom because there's a terrible track record here of delivering.
I guess obviously we've got also concerns that are national concerns. I get that, but higher interest rates in tandem with high inflation. So clearly, that's obviously something you've got to grapple with in Ontario too, right?
Absolutely, and that's why. And this will sound like I'm making a political answer, but I'm not. That's why we lowered the price of gas. 10 cents a liter, 4.3 cents earlier, 5.7 cents just recently. That's why we took the cost off the vehicle validation stickers. Yes, you still need to register your vehicle, but you don't need to have the sticker, and you don't need to pay for it any longer. And that's about a $465 assistance to every single Ontario family, and we recognize that. We urge the federal government too to join us in our reduction of the price of gasoline. Even if it's temporary, join us. People are hurting and they need our help.
Overall, optimism for Ontario's economy, though?
Oh, yeah, I've got certainly both thumbs up. I know what's coming down the pipe in the auto sector, the thousands of people that will be put to work. Look, we've created Ontario, the people of Ontario and the businesses have created 550,000 jobs since the last election. 300,000 before COVID, 250,000 jobs have been created since COVID. And there's still a backlog of 375,000 empty jobs. So we've got a lot of room to backfill, no matter what happens in the economy, Tony.
Vic Fedeli, it's been a pleasure having you on the program once again. Good luck with your travels and with your economic development. Thank you again.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you for having me.
Great discussion with the Honourable Vic Fedeli there. Lots going on in Ontario in terms of advanced manufacturing, the auto, aerospace, and other sectors. A lot on his plate, a lot of challenges because of things out of his control, but obviously Ontario has a plan. I'm glad you got to hear about that on my program. Thanks for watching.